Hello, my diggity dooper dilly dally daisy dukes Dexter devotees. Dexter's back, and so am I here to talk about it. Of course, this time it's Resurrection, episode 5, titled Murder Horny, which, as per Dexter episode titles go, is just absolute perfection. It's one of the best. Starting off though, before I get to that, I gotta say that this is a bit of a murmuring episode, in which I mean, not a lot happens. It's kind of like mid, I guess, at least in terms of comparison to last week's episode anyway. It came off as kind of just okay. It's not bad, it's constructive. It's one of those in-between episodes of TV where, you know, things are established, relationships are evolved, and conversations are had, but not a lot of action is made. But of course, all good TV shows are really based around necessary episodes like this to build up to the S-tier shit. Anyway, so I just wanted to say that out of the way. That's my general tiny bit of review without any details. But let's actually get to the ins and outs of this episode, shall we? So the episode starts off right where we left off after episode 4, with Dexter revealing his living status to a guilty Harrison, who of course last he knew he himself had killed. What follows is sudden denial and disbelief, with Harrison predictably in utter shock, which is quickly cut short though by Dexter taking him on an Uber ride back to his house at Blessing's spare place. Wanting any and all explanations, Harrison quickly drops his reluctance and follows, you know, basically demanding answers. But a very funny line to me early on reads here where Harrison asks if Dexter had been stalking him, to which he answers, "No, I care about you." Which to me reads as just about the most delusional thing a stalker could say, right? Like, care factor doesn't exactly dilute stalkness factor. But one interesting thing here to note though is that when Dexter immediately denies the question, he looks straight into the camera just for a second, and this is either a sign showing that the character is, you know, knowingly lying and it's kind of a manipulative play here, or it's possibly just Michael C. Hall making a mistake, who's to say. Explanations now are all round as Dexter describes how the ice cold weather back in Iron Lake slowed his heart rate down, causing him to not bleed out after being shot, which we already knew, but Harrison's reaction is vital as he's basically engrossed contempt in comparing him to horror movie monsters like Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees types who can't be killed and just keep coming back. And honestly, where's the lie? Harrison ain't wrong. And even Dexter acknowledges himself that there are similarities there, being on his 11th season of television if we count Original Sin. Dexter is the horror movie monster with the most screen time by far, technically, if we want to count it like that. You know, looking at it from a certain angle anyway. He's up there with the greats, Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, they ain't got nothing on him. Next up is the explanation on his freedom. Again, Dexter gets Harrison up to speed on the whole flimsy argument that Logan shot at him. He was just acting in self-defense, which apparently everybody bought. Still makes absolutely no sense to me, but it's okay because we just roll with it. But the point really is though that Harrison describes the intensity of their what he thought would be final interaction 10 or so weeks ago and what it's done to him since. But Dexter, being the all-loving, all-sacrificial father that he thinks he is at least, when need be, takes the blame for what happened between them. He takes ownership for ordering Harrison to aim the gun at him and for basically walking him through murdering his own father. But good news, he's not dead anyway, so bye-bye trauma, only not so much because of the whole Ryan Foster situation, of course. It really kills that whole clean slate. Dexter, though, being the smartest man in the room at all times, lets him know that he already knew about the murder, and in fact, that's how he tracked him down in the first place, and opts to show him support, which, coming from a normal, not murdering person's point of view like me, I have to say that I'm not sure that's what Harrison needs right now. But Dexter describes the situation early on in Original Sin from Dexter's past when he made a similar violent act against a would-be sexual assaulter who had attempted to take advantage of Deb back in his college days. His point is that he gets it. He understands Harrison here. He relates, and they are one and the same, supposedly sharing their darkness. He describes that it wouldn't be until he was 20 when he got the euphoric release of making his first kill, as we get another brief flashback to Original Sin once again, where we see that Dexter killed, I don't remember her name, but she was a nurse, and she was the first one that he killed. And basically, yeah, he's describing it as like this big, important, happy memory for him. To this though, Harrison jabs back. He describes his experience as vastly different. He's not having some kind of fantastic feeling of release or enjoyment. He's in hell with constant nightmares and remorse and reminders. And Dexter's quite taken aback by this, realizing that Harrison might not be so hungry for blood as he. And as the conversation heats up, Dexter sort of desperately tries to rationalize Harrison's actions in an attempt to alleviate his guilt, also while defending his own code, if we're being honest. He goes on to explain how Harrison's actions were really a net positive if he considers the actions that Ryan Foster may have gone on to make if Harrison didn't stop him.
When you take a man's life, you're not just killing him. You're snuffing out all the things he'll ever become.
But Harrison's not really having this. He could have put a stop to it in other ways. He could have simply called security. The situation didn't have to result in cold-blooded murder. And basically, in Harrison's eyes, there's not really any way of justifying it. He just feels absolute guilt, and that's all there is to it. And it's here where it's becoming more and more clear to us, and both parties of this argument, that Dexter had been attempting to mash a circle down a square hole in regards to Harrison. During the Iron Lake days of the New Blood era, Dexter was trying to push his own way of thinking Harrison's way, in an attempt to nurture something unnatural and ill-fitting into Harrison. And this is pretty much Harrison's argument here, where he's basically blaming Dexter for his actions regarding Ryan Foster, which is a bit of a weak argument, at least legally speaking, if you ask me, because, you know, Harrison did do the actions of killing Ryan Foster. You can't exactly blame Dexter for that when he wasn't even there. He really didn't have that much to do with it. Kind of a flimsy argument for you there. But then again, that goes into the whole nature versus nurture argument and whether or not Dexter kind of infected him with the darkness to begin with or not. And in response to all this, Dexter says there's more to who you are than your worst moment, which was a very meaningful line to me. Spoken by Dexter, once again, trying to compress Harrison's guilt in a certain way. Perhaps this is just what a father tells his son, but this amount of empathy and understanding and forgiveness to a person's ugly actions is really powerful stuff in my mind, and I really think it matters in terms of what the whole meaning for the show overall is. If Harrison or Dexter or whoever is a bad person, that there's space for forgiveness. Except, you know, we're talking serial killer stuff here too, so it gets a little bit more complicated than that. Harrison though snaps back, asking if this was his way of thinking and how he coped with his own guilt regarding the lives lost in his own life, including Rita and Deb, but most notably to Dexter, he also names LaGuardia, which instantly sends a red flag and signal down Dexter's spine as he pretty much asks, what the hell are you talking about? Because how could Harrison have possibly known about that? To which Harrison drops the next big bombshell, being that Angel Batista's in town, and he's been asking a lot of questions. And with that, things just turn up another notch, because Dexter now knows about Batista's thirst for justice and allegations coming his way. Basically, the whole idea is that we know that Dexter is Batista's white whale. Nothing's gonna stop him coming his way. Harrison then lets Dexter know that he didn't say anything though to Batista. He didn't confirm nor deny all questions shot his way, and didn't screw with Dexter's reputation in any way. Dexter, in slight relief, expresses his belief that Batista doesn't have anything on him or them anyway, considering he talked to him a week or so ago and nothing happened. Confirming to Harrison now that Batista was not honest with him and may not have been there for his best interest back when they spoke earlier that morning. Given that he didn't disclose his knowledge that Dexter was still alive, likely in a bit of a manipulation tactic. And it just goes to show that, like, Harrison's not sure who to trust. Basically, though, the episode so far, despite all I've said, has pretty much just been about getting both characters up to speed with shit that we already knew. So, possibly, as we're, 10 minutes into this, or however long it is after I edit this down, I've said nothing. Finally, though, in an act of defiance and quite on the nose symbolism, Dexter then offers to take the constant ticking watch off of Harrison's hands. And on a not so secret, deeper level, is offering to carry Harrison's burden. And much like the ticking sounds acting as a constant reminder and metaphor for Harrison's guilt to begin with being quite obvious and lacking in subtlety, as does this moment. However, that doesn't make it any less meaningful. Sometimes the obvious is just the best way to convey the message. It's the best way to tell the story. Dexter, though, then trying to act normal as if nothing has happened between the two and that they are just like best mates like they've always been, then offers for them to go out for a meal together, to which Harrison turns down and decides to leave, letting Dexter know that he can't just come back from the dead and assume position back once again as head honcho, as loving father, as just exactly where they left off. Shit's not that simple, and Harrison isn't even sure he wants Dexter in his life to begin with. Harrison gets out of there for now, but we know that this is definitely obviously not going to be their last interaction or anything. This is not Harrison leaving the show, don't worry. The scene though ends with Dexter watching him walk away, feeling intense frustration at what could have been a simple happy reunion between the two. But I think deep down he knew and has always known this whole time that it was never going to be that easy. And furthermore, as Ghost Harry now points out, that it's going to take more than just one conversation to put things back into perspective and reset their relationship. So for now, that's that. Anyway, later now, while on a rideshare shift again, because I guess Dexter needs to make money somehow, we get some super emo depressed voiceover on Dexter's part describing how Harrison doesn't want him and how he doesn't have any friends. And boy, I feel so sad and mad and bad and not glad for my main man here. I also find it relatable in like Dexter's loneliness, I'm not gonna lie. Not that I have a son who tried to kill me and upon my reveal of being alive still was then kind of turned down, at least for the time being, or anything like that. But still, kind of a lonely person too, Dexter. Don't worry, we're in this together, you fictional man. Anyway, looking back at his riders in the back seat through the rearview mirror with an intense hatred for what they have as they're kissing in the back.
Ted, we found you in the park throwing rocks at old couples. Why should they be happy?
He's then reminded of Mia, the Lady Vengeance killer, who he's not so secretly keen on. His voiceover describes this being one of the few he does actually seem to have a connection with, and she's not unappealing in the looks department. And once again, Dexter is KISS kissing in a tree, crushing hard. So calling her up, he invites her to a showing of Swan Lake, knowing that she likes ballet. Her answer is mixed, as apparently she's uppity on specifically Swan Lake, describing it as a bore, but is keen to do something, anything else. And so with that, bowling Dexter is once again upon us, which we haven't seen since probably fucking like season 2 or 3 or 4 days or something like that. I don't remember specifically when he went out last bowling with the Miami Metro crew, but it's been a damn while. But yeah, the two go bowling together. And while criticizing his not so great but better at running ability bowling, Mia playfully pokes fun his way at a 7-10 split, to which he makes a spare. To which in turn she strikes, beating his game. It's cute. They're cute. They bowl. They're dating. They're bloodthirsty serial killers. It's adorable. I love it. I'm all here for it. My heart is soaring. I'm like, yes, even Dexter can find love. I say as if it's the first time. But anyway, once the two finish bowling, they kind of sit down together, and Mia confirms to him that she's pretty much just as lonely as he is. And they both describe their faulty family lives for a bit. Dexter says it's complicated, admitting the fact that what's complicated about it is that he has a son who thought that he killed him, but just found out that he didn't, and who currently hates him. And what's left of his family apart from that can either be described as an imaginary ghost father or a brotherly ex-co-worker who nowadays is on the hunt for him. Mia describes her situation as similarly complicated though, saying she has no real relationship with her mother or sister Hazel, which by the way, I have to point out, it was a surprise to me because I figured when she described the attack from her mother's boyfriend back in childhood that he'd also killed her. But that was a big old assumption on my part, I guess, and an incorrect one, because she's still alive, but has never seemed to forgive Mia for leaving her when that happened in the first place. It doesn't help that Hazel never found out the truth about her vengefying actions following all that either. And to that, Mia concludes, it sucks when you can't be honest about who you are to the people you're closest to, because you know that if they knew, fuck me. That's such a long fucking quote. It sucks when you can't be honest about who you are to the people you're closest to, because you know if they knew who you are, they would turn their back on you. And the two are hugely connecting over their loneliness here, their lifestyles, their broken relationships, everything. It seems like the two are a perfect match and like nothing could go wrong at this point. Following their daytime bowling date, Mia immediately invites him up to another more intense nighttime date at a wine bar to meet up later tonight. But before their send-off, she asks if Dexter's ever considered a threesome. I mean, she words it a little bit more classily than I, in a way where she says, have you ever considered a menage a trois. Menage a trois. I'm not exactly confident on if that's how you pronounce it or anything, or exactly what it means, but I know basically it means she's asking if he wants to screw somebody together. Mistaking the proposal for a normal person's one, he asks, shouldn't it just be them two for the first time that they, do the old down and dirty? To which she clarifies she meant on the job, collaborating on a kill, which is just about the hottest thing that she could possibly ever ask of Dexter. What an endeavor. Lady Vengeance and the Bay Harbor Butcher. Again, they seem like a perfect match. This time, sarcastically being remarked by a judgmental Ghost Harry, prompting the question later on that when has teaming up to kill ever worked for Dexter? His two examples being Miguel Prado and Lumen. And I gotta say, what the hell was wrong with Lumen, Ghost Harry, just by the way, you Mr. fucking judgmental prick? They worked together, they finished their quest, they respected each other, sure. She left, she got out of the game, but that was after they finished what they were doing. Might not have been permanent, but they worked well together. I'm not buying this anti-Lumen sentiment. No, thank you. I'll give you Miguel Prado though. Yeah, that was bad news. Anyway, Dexter points out though that those two were different anyway. They weren't quote unquote real killers. Mia would be different. She's been killing independently for years. Dexter's getting so eager that he's hardly considering any of the possible negatives. Ghost Harry continues to play the reluctant card as Dexter even considers that he might tell her who he really is later that night, considering it could be safe since they both have a code. A risk also considering the fact that she could point him Prater's way. Next minute though, Dexter's imaginary ghost conversation is cut short when he hears some clatter outside of an in-pain Prudence, Blessing's mum, who had taken a fall upon the front steps. He goes out to help her and bring her inside to an exasperated Blessing, who informs Dexter of these weird recent episodes she's been having ever since stopping radiation therapy, and that he wants to take her to the hospital. So I guess that she's an old woman with cancer, which is just genuinely sad for her, but it also feels a little bit irrelevant from everything else that's going on, I'm not gonna lie. Anyway, Dexter has a brief exchange with her though, saying that he'd feel the same way if she was his mother about wanting to take her to the hospital, to which Prudence basically says she's over it. She doesn't want to die in a sad, depressing hospital room surrounded by doctors and machines and things like that. She's lived her life, life, and she wants to just let be. She wants to finish off her life, basically, surrounded by loved ones in a familiar place. She says she has experience. Throughout her life, she has looked into the eyes of good and evil, and right now, you're looking into the eyes of both, Dexter's voiceover says. Anyway, it sucks to be Prudence, I guess, and that's that. That's all we see of Prudence in this episode. I don't know, I'm not like shitting on this character and being like, get out of here, but I am a bit like, this is not as exciting as the rest of it. Later, we see Dexter receiving an order in the mail of his usual old case of blood slides, ready to start again and be filled with trophies. However, his on-the-go makeshift blood slide that he'd created in last week's episode in the tattoo store didn't quite fit in this box properly with the size of the glass used.
Whoopsie.
This is all as Dexter concludes that he must find a new place to hide all of his new collection of trophies as well, ultimately settling on the spot where Joy used to hide her weed when she lived there, as per mentioned in a previous episode. I think that was episode 3. Cut 2! Uma Thurman, not Uma Thurman, but Charlie at a hospital bed besides her mother named Mildred, another unwell old woman. And it's here where I'm surprised we're getting a personal life look at Charlie at all, to be honest. I didn't think that that was the kind of character that she was, but here we are. And she describes a kind of like fictional teaching job to her mother here, and a fake proud moment, or maybe a moment from her past, of a third grader reading in front of the class. I guess she's telling her mother what she wants to hear and isn't actually telling her what her real work involves. And it's a brief and kind of odd look into this mysterious side of this Charlie character. The only character really whose angle I don't get so far. I'm not sure who she is or where her arc is going. With others, I get it. You know, Dexter's gonna kill Al Jolly, for example. Prater's gonna be the big bad. Dexter's Dexter. I don't know what's going to happen with Charlie. Cut back to Harrison's side of things as we see him walking through the streets as he gets a call from Claudette the Cop Wallace, aka Mrs. Quirky Headphones Detective. She wants to follow up on his call that he had made that morning but hung up on, which is something that happened near the end of last week's episode, prompting the idea that it's always better to speak face to face, so she asks him to meet up later. And he tries to dodge it, but she's basically got him pushed into a corner, so he accepts to come to her in the afternoon. Later, upon meeting her at the precinct, Harrison's explanation for calling her earlier was to get the number of Shauna, Ryan Foster's would-be victim, to apologize to her for not doing more to help on that night. Claudette points out that he probably could have just got the number from his very own place of work, and at this point in time, secret residence back at the hotel, to which he turns down, saying he doesn't have access to that kind of information, and even if he asked, his boss Stefan isn't his biggest fan, but in turn thought Claudette would be happy to help. And this whole thing kind of shines an innocent light on him. He's trying to like do a bit of damage control here, and I don't know how good the lie is, but I think it makes enough sense given the information that Claudette knows. That is until he drops the word guilty throughout his rambling explanation, which triggers Claudette immediately to pick up on Harrison's mental well-being. Saying he at all felt guilty sparks something in her. And she points out something interesting too, as she's connected the dots that she picked up on a news story from his Iron Lake days, when he stopped a potential school shooting and was paraded as a hero at the high school at the time, pointing out that Harrison has a history of helping people in desperate situations, acting even in violent ways to do so. The scene ends with Claudette denying access to Shauna's phone number, given that Harrison is still a potential suspect, which is news to him. Later, Harrison receives a phone call from Dexter, and it's a bit awkward and sad, and feels like a very real relationship that has fallen apart, but that is trying desperately to be mended in a way, as the two confusingly navigate the rules and boundaries being set between the two. Harrison isn't ready to talk, and Dexter has to give him space, which is the opposite of what he wants. The whole thing's very complicated, and it honestly feels like a very real place. Like, this doesn't just feel like, TV drama. There was something really, I don't know, realistic about it. That's all I gotta say. I already said the word real. I was trying to think of another adjective, but that's it. It felt real. One line which I feel like reveals a lot about Dexter as a character though, is when he prompts another hangout, to which Harrison turns down again, saying he has too much on, like the whole Ryan Foster investigation. The interesting line being in Dexter's response to that, as he almost surprisingly reacts like, still? It's like it doesn't even register in Dexter's mind that this is a thing that Harrison would still be worried about, because if it was him, like, this would be such a non-issue. When he kills people, that's just it. It's done. Dexter has always been very capable of compartmentalizing his violent acts and his personal life. It doesn't always work in terms of balance, and it's always endangered those close to him, as the show has beaten us over the head with that idea. But it didn't weigh on Dexter's mind in terms of guilt when spending time living that other life. You know, when he was spending time with Rita or whatever after having killed somebody, he wasn't really thinking about having killed somebody at that point. He was thinking about Rita. And it's here where I gotta say that I actually think I take Harrison's side more so here, where even though we're seeing everything from Dexter's perspective with his voiceover, I feel like the showrunners haven't quite forgotten that the interesting angle to modern Dexter is how much of an unreliable narrator he is. And basically, there is that bit of dissonance between him and his morality and Harrison and all that kind of juicy stuff there. I find that really interesting rather than just portraying Dexter as a straight up hero. Cut to Peter Dinklage's Leon Prater now prepping to be interviewed by some television personality lady. According to the X-ray credits feature on Amazon Prime, I guess her name is Leslie Stahl, playing herself. And I guess that means I'm supposed to know who that is, but I don't. Anyway, here we get the important information that Prater grew up poor in foster homes and since has been doing his part since making his fortune to help those in need via paying off the mortgages of the homes of the adopted foster children. Claiming humbleness though, he doesn't wish to make this fact known. It's arguably because he wants to not disclose too much information to anybody about himself given his weird obsession with killers and his regular meetups with wanted criminals though. The point is though that Prater is actually new money rich. A surprising piece of info, I think, given that we probably all would have assumed that it would be the other way around. But in actuality, he's a described self-made orphan billionaire. Anyway, so during the actual interview now though, first we learn that the reason for it to begin with is to celebrate the anniversary of the fact that Prater has been spending 10 years hosting a gala benefiting the New York City Police, an extremely exclusive event of only 200 attendees, described as the hottest ticket in town. And this interview is obviously promoting. And here Prater basically just wants to come off as innocent and humble and non-controversial. He says the real guests of honor will be wounded police officers over any kind of tabloidy, shiny celebrity who may make an appearance. But under the pump, the interviewer keeps pushing him on trying to find some kind of controversial angle, such as why he keeps financially supporting this organization to begin with. At least the show tries to make it seem like that's kind of an interesting angle, and this is a vaguely controversial question, but I mean, it's not really. It's kind of a really tame question to me, if you ask me, but whatever. I don't know. Anyway, Prater then reveals that when he was a child, his parents were killed by a drunk driver in an accident, and ever since that night when he had been rescued by police officers, that he'd looked up to them ever since and wanted to give back. So basically the whole point is that everybody in Dexter, all the time, always, every single character, especially in Resurrection here, has to have a sob story, or I don't know, the writers think we can't care about them because Charlie has a sick mum now, and Mia has the whole thing that happened in her past, and like everybody has to have a tragic backstory. And I get it because it's like building up characters and stuff, but it is a bit funny where it's like, okay, but you don't have to like have been through a horrible thing like that to, you know, deserve empathy. Anyway, the interview's final question is, Leon Prater, who are you? It's just there where I gotta say, wow, what cutting edge journalism right there. What a question. Cut to a time change. It's nighttime now in the city of New York and it's time for Mia and Dexter's wine date. Dexter continues to be an amateur when it comes to wine connoisseurship, which is undoubtedly not a word, I don't think. Sommelier, I guess is the word that they use, which I don't know, is a fancy word for like an expert wine taster, I guess. Sorry, I don't drink, I don't care about wine, so I don't actually know this word. It never comes into use for me, so I apologize for the vocabularily limited old me. I'm sorry. Anyway, when Mia points out though that describing the taste doesn't have to be so literal, Dexter accidentally gives too much information away for a second where he lets himself loose and describes the taste of this wine that he's tasting as reminding him of Miami after it rains, which she asked if he'd spent a lot of time in Miami. He confesses that he grew up there and she asks what else has he been hiding. On the verge of confessing that he's the Bay Harbor butcher right then and there, Mia interrupts and the two kind of talk over each other just for a second. What ends up being said is that they're both keen on trying out what they'd suggested earlier in killing somebody together. And Mia expresses interest in trying to kill somebody Red's way, as in the back of an Uber car, to which Dexter says he thinks there's going to be a pretty limited window for suitable targets of rideshare drivers who are also sexual predators, to which Mia reveals that actually she doesn't really give that much of a shit and any driver will do. Horrifying Dexter, it turns out that the big bombshell here again is that Mia, starting out, did kill with a code of only taking out sexual predators, which is not actually quite as aligned by morality as he'd once thought. And this is the big moment where it's like, oh, mamma mia, Mia, you're a dead woman. You are done for. Old lady vengeance, goodbye. See ya, Jessica Jones. It was nice knowing you. This is like this big revelation that I really didn't see coming because it's like they build up this character with so much screen time and stuff and like a bit of an arc here where we learn her backstory and all this kind of stuff, only for this to be the case and she's actually going to be like a bad guy to Dexter. That's kind of interesting to me. She enjoys killing and it doesn't really matter who the target is. She describes that her name of Lady Vengeance came from the media rationalizing her actions, and it's not really a reflection of who she is. She's annoyed by labels of her killing persona, thinking that the public can't understand that a woman could be somebody who just enjoys murder and instead have to make some kind of sense of it in their own way by fictionalizing a crusader backstory. It's like it only makes sense to the public if the woman who's been killing only does so because she was once a victim who's now fighting back, to which she thinks, if anything, is kind of an offensive stereotype. It's like she thinks it's sexist. It's like, I can kill anybody that I want. She's like a girl boss killer were no code or rules. To which Dexter clarifies, so those men you killed were innocent? To which Mia says, define innocent, which I kind of thought was funny because it's true, especially given the fact that we're dealing with serial killer characters that, you know, innocent is a little bit more complex than just black and white. There are shades of grey. But basically she's saying that the media went out to describe her victims as predators, but that wasn't really what her goal was. And the truth is that she was the predator. And what's funny too is that she's still saying this in a vaguely seductive way, trying to get who she knows to be read a bit all hot and bothered. She's trying to say it in like a flirtatious way and sexy and whatnot, while unknowingly doing quite the opposite and enthusiastically signing her own death warrant like an idiot. It's okay though, because Dexter also feels like an idiot who didn't see this coming, and to be honest, neither did I. But I do have to say that it was also a little bit disappointing because it makes it so that their complex relationship isn't quite as new a concept as I once thought via last week's episode, and that this is just going to be another random killer of the week kind of person that Dexter has to deal with in some sort of way, suppressing the potential of where the story was headed here and now. I'll give them that it was unexpected, and I like that subversion of expectations and stuff. And again, given the fact that that built up this character so much only for her to just be, yeah, any old killer who will kill at random and stuff, and not so much be such a sympathetic character despite her sob story, as I was saying before, is kind of like a brave thing to do, I suppose. It's kind of like, so this character isn't quite as likable as we once thought. But there is something a little bit disappointing in the fact that they're not going to go on to, I don't know, be a Bonnie and Clyde type serial killing duo or whatever. But I guess, you know, we're going to have to see where it goes from here. Upping the urgency though is that unsurprisingly Mia suggested they kill somebody in his style a la rideshare driver, and they do it tonight. And once again, tonight's the night. So now as Mia pays for their night out, Dexter gets a moment alone to prepare his M99 needle, ready to go and take Lady Vengeance out on his own. Together now they walk the streets, Mia loud-mouthing about how his plan usually works out, asking numerous questions about how Red doesn't get caught, to which Dexter doesn't really know the answer to either, because obviously this isn't his real method of killing. So he suggests that they find a quieter street with less witnesses, but she's way ahead of him, essentially saying, who cares, don't worry about it. Rideshare drivers might be weary of single men by themselves, but less so for couples like them. To which she turns around and greets a random driver who in turn asks if she's Tina. She says, yep, I'm Tina, what's going on? And she's about to get in. It's almost a done deal, if not for Dexter desperately putting a stop to it, saying, no, our car is actually an SUV or whatever, and getting out of there. And basically it becomes this sort of argument between the two in Dexter and Mia. And it's clear to Mia that Dexter, or Red or whatever, is freaking out, summing up as Red's performance anxiety for both killing and sex following last week's shower ditch moment too. But basically he says he's changed his mind and actually he's not ready to share this side of him. He's used to acting alone and he doesn't want to show his method to somebody in this way. And instantly Mia acts on the offensive right back and they disagree. What could have been quite the connection in her eyes has been violently and utterly severed as she announces her parting ways and says it's fine, they don't have to kill together, whatever, but that Red basically got her all excited and, as the title suggests, murder horny, so she's gonna go take a different random out for herself and walks away. Dexter also walks away in the opposite direction, thinking not only has Luau disappeared, which hasn't prompted any concern yet, but if another one of Prater's guests disappear too, just how bad it's gonna look for Mr. New Guy at their next meeting. Yet still heads on over to Mia's apartment now to prepare for whatever it is that he's about to do. Dexter definitely has some sort of mischievous plan here, and well, obviously I'll get to that very soon. I'd also argue here that it doesn't matter if it's a risk, Dexter has to do something, obviously, because by inserting himself into these relationships and this group, it's too late. And I guess the argument against that is that part of the code is don't get caught, which is also a priority to him. However, beyond his own best interest, I feel like Dexter, along with his code, has a responsibility, kind of like Spider-Man, like literally with great serial killing power comes great serial killing responsibility, and he can't let an innocent man die. So basically, he's obviously gonna have to do something. We then witness Mia walk into a bar and pick up a random unassuming guy sitting by himself named Mark. According to the credits, that's Mark with a C and not a K. Ew, gross. Anyway, basically skipping the ins and outs of their time together and her whole seduction play, and whatever goes on there, which probably doesn't take much to be honest, we quickly cut to their entrance into her apartment together. She orders Mark to take off his clothes and we witness from Dexter's point of view as he watches from across the street, peering through her window like a real creep. It's here where Mia then knocks Mark out, smack bang in the head with a bottle, and ties him up to some kind of like rack-like contraption that looks like it'd take part in some kind of BDSM situation or something like that. I don't know, I might be entirely wrong about that, and maybe it's got some sort of practical use. Is it a rack for wine? Actually, that just occurred to me. I don't know what it is. Anyway, so now instead of intervening in the usual Dexter way though, and stopping the kill and taking one for himself, Dexter then calls the police instead in a totally different kind of thing than he normally does. Also, by the way, with a phony New York accent, he tells the cops that he heard a lady screaming and some chick called herself Lady Vengeance or some shit, which was just so fucking funny, by the way. So now with a ball gag in mouth and tied up to that aforementioned contraption of some sort, in the form of like an X shape, by the way, Mia has Mark in his underwear and ready to be tortured with various murder tools like pliers and whatnot set out on the table in front of him. Starting off though, apparently she plans on like burning out his eyes so he won't be able to see, but ensures that he'll still be able to feel, so that's real comforting. Right before the police bust in and get her, New York's finest at their finest, Dexter says in voiceover, watching as the arrest takes place. What's more is that he'd also planted Ryan Foster's watch in her apartment too, ready to be discovered and have her take the blame for the murder of the serial rapist, which fits at least her public reputation. Which is just a little bit way too perfect, and I mean that in a complimentary way. That's just so awesome. It's like the exact sort of like full circle moment stuff that I love from Dexter. It just like fits in just absolutely perfectly in exactly the kind of way that I want. It's like killing two birds with one stone, taking care of business like an absolute pro motherfucker. I love it so much. Dexter's so smart. He's my man crush. What a great man that does so many good things. And I don't mean morally good, I just mean, wow, that was smart and cool. I don't know what the fuck I'm saying. Anyway, we then cut to Claudette the cop's perspective, whom she and Melvin Mann investigate the apartment. Claudette says she didn't anticipate Ryan Foster's murderer to be the doing of a serial killer, to which Melvin points out it adds up to her theory, though, that it was somebody with a heroic complex. So for now, the story fits, but Claudette's not quite fully sold and seems to think something's up about all that, being the super cop she is and always seems to be right about every little thing. Again, I'm not a huge fan of this character, but the tension as to her getting closer and closer to the truth is still pretty strong despite that. Even though she does come across as like kind of a shallow character, more of a shallow character than I think they're trying to make her be. Again, with the desperate, oh, headphones, I'm so quirky. Beyond that, she's still like an interesting challenge, I guess, for the characters that we love, Harrison and Dexter, to face. I just said we love Harrison. That might be controversial, sorry, but I like him. Anyway, cut to Leon Prater watching his own interview, now happily on TV, edited together from the night before. He laughs at his own little joke like an arsehole, and we get a line about how they wouldn't believe the types of guests who agree to join him at his house for dinner parties. Which is just Resurrection poking a bit of fun and being a bit clever, and I love it. It's like, you know, it's a little bit cheeky. Anyway, this is before Charlie walks in, informing him of the situation involving Mia's arrest. She says the feds could move her at any time, and it's going to be very hard to get to her, to which Prater responds that he hired her to make problems go away, and asks if he's been mistaken, which she answers no. So it's pretty clear, I thought, that the plan now is for Charlie to kill Prater's weird loose ends like Mia here, right? Wouldn't be the first time either, as we saw her do so with Keith in last episode. I'm not sure though, because we also then get a scene of Charlie now visiting Mia in prison, acting as her lawyer and promising that their mutual friend in Leon Prater will make sure that her stay in prison is as comfortable and short as possible. So I'm a little bit unsure if they're still going to be working together, if there's some form of trust. They have known each other for like quite a number of years and stuff, but it still seems like the sort of situation where Leon Prater wouldn't even risk it at this point. It's like she's a loose end. She might, you know, we might get connected somehow. So the whole situation, like, it just feels a little bit like too much of a big risk. But then again, how are you going to kill her in prison? Maybe they're going to try and get her like the best defense, get her out of there, then kill her. I don't know. Now we cut to Batista, the first time that we've seen him in this episode and the last time, as we see him working on a case alone in a hotel room, passing through paperwork before eyeing a news story on TV announcing that Ryan Foster was killed by Lady Vengeance. And to that, I gotta say, please, Batista, do not doubt yourself in this moment. You know, you're on the right track. Keep pursuing Dexter. I'm sure that's what's going to happen, but it was just that moment where I'm like, please don't just believe that, like Melvin Mann did back at the investigation scene at Mia's apartment. He was just ready to be like, yep, okay, case closed. But no, Claudette the cop and I'm assuming Batista, they know that more shit's going on here. Things are murky, things are suspicious, and they're like the greatest cops in the world that know everything all the time, so they're going to be onto something. Next up to find out about the arrest is Harrison. Elsa is excited to give him the good news, which basically absolves him. But upon learning this, Harrison instantly confronts Dexter showing up at his door. Anyway, the two now sit down. Harrison first points out that it feels like growth, though, on Dexter's part, with him having gotten the killer arrested instead of killing them himself. Of course, he doesn't know the full context as to why. Really, that has more to do with Prater than it has to do with his own morals or wanting to be good or wanting to not kill for Harrison's benefits or anything like that. It was really more so because he doesn't want to risk it with Prater. But also, he conveniently was able to put the blame on Ryan Foster there as well. Anyway, then Dexter expresses his own feelings on the importance of having people who truly know you. And to him, that's Harrison. It's here where Dexter explains his mistake all the way back in season 4 of the original series, where he mistook Trinity for being a mentor instead of a target for too long. Longtime Dexter fans are well aware of the ongoings that led to Rita's death, but Harrison is hearing all this in context for the first time, and it's honestly a really big deal. He's finally hearing the truth that he's wanted to know since the very existence of the character. To Harrison, though, the whole story prompts him to ask what's so different now to then. If trying to live this double life of a family man and killer was a danger then, why isn't it now? now too. The difference, Dexter says, is that he hopes he can have Harrison in his life, to which I have to say isn't really much of an answer to that at all, actually, in all honesty, like, but whatever. That's okay, because truths are finally being told and amends are being made, so whatever, we can ignore that tiny little detail. Anyway, lastly, Dexter expresses that he doesn't want Harrison to be like him anymore. He did once. At one point, he wanted him to be violent, he wanted him to be a killer, and he wanted to channel his ways through him. But the fact that Harrison almost turned himself into the cops proves that he has a goodness and humanity that Dexter never will, which is why he needs Harrison to ground him, to give him some sense of morality, and he apologizes for ever trying to mold Harrison into his image at all. We then get one of the most beautiful sentiments in a Dexter episode ever, I would say, honestly. I don't care if it's corny, but Dexter says, Harrison, I have so many reasons to kill, but you're my reason to live. And fuck me, you make me want to cry, Dexter. Anyway, the two are now properly reunited. Even Ghost Harry announces that Dexter did good in case we had any doubts about it. And that's where the episode ends off. That's the episode. We've had some surprising revelations, especially in Mia's true intentions, some meaningful interaction between Dexter and Harrison pushing their relationship further into a positive place now that he knows the truth, and a little bit more insight in terms of who Leon Prater is, and also who Charlie is, slightly. I'm still kind of vague on her. I don't really get what her angle is, but it's interesting seeing their sort of double lives taking place here, where everybody sort of has these certain different things going on with Charlie and her mother, with Prater and his obsession with killers, but also his whole like charity case thing going on. Lastly, I also just want to describe a couple theories I've either read or thought of myself for the rest of the season. It's only a couple here, but one being that they mentioned a killer in the last episode called the New York Ripper, and they alluded to their murder weapon being a crowbar, being part of Leon Prater's memorabilia. And I read in some comments a possible idea that either Prater himself is the Ripper, but I don't think that's the case. I think it's much more possible and much more likely that the Ripper himself is part of the memorabilia, and basically Leon Prater is just as much a collector of like things as he is people, and he has collected the New York Ripper person, and that person is being held in captivity somewhere in his museum-esque bunker somewhere. The second one I thought up myself, though it's probably a bit like, it's very common and I'm probably far from the only person that thought of this, and it's kind of a natural direction for the season to go anyway, but I'm calling it now. Batista is a dead man. By the end of this season, Batista will be donezo, and I think it will be at the hands of Harrison though, in an attempt to protect his father. That's just my assumption here. Maybe it'll be like a double team up duo of Dexter and Harrison both killing him together. I don't know, but Batista's dead. Batista's a dead man, he's done for. I'm telling you right here, right now. Though, after this week's episode though, I kind of actually hope not, in terms of it being Harrison that kills him. Because I kind of hope that Harrison never kills again, given that he has like this pure heart. But who knows with Dexter, anything can happen, anybody can be a killer. I don't know, guess we'll have to see. But yeah, that's about it for the episode. That is episode 5, Murder Horny. And those are my thoughts. Let me know what you thought about the episode. Again, I think it was kind of like, it was a good episode, but it wasn't like the strongest one or anything. Obviously 4 was like the big highlight so far, but again, not a bad thing. Not every episode can be like the biggest, craziest banger of an episode ever. You know, we have to have these in between episodes, so that's kind of what this one was. I did like it. I thought it was very surprising what's going on with Mia. I'm very interested to see where that's going, especially the fact that Dexter didn't just kill her, so I guess there's more room for this character to grow, unless she gets killed next episode by either Charlie or Dexter, who the fuck knows. But basically, there's potential for what's going on there. I guess that's about all that I have to say. So before you go, please do that things, which are like, comment, share, subscribe, all that shit, and I'm out of here. Goodbye, see you next week.